Union Solidarity will soon be heading to court, this to fight the suspension of Elana Barkhuizen, the Schweizer-Reneke Lower Primary School teacher who has been at the center of what has been perceived as a racist picture debacle. Now, briefing the media in Pretoria yesterday, the trade union said that the teacher is not guilty and her dignity must be restored. Now, was this whole debacle a racist act, or was it just a huge misunderstanding? And this turn of events once again shows how much work still needs to be done to build South Africa. But let's unpack this for now. Connie Mulder is head of Solidarity Research Institute, and he joins us from our Pretoria Studios. And here in our Joburg Studios, we have Vukulu Sizwe Maphindani, who is the president of the Black Centric Forum. Gentlemen, thanks and welcome to both of you.
Good morning.
So let me start with the obvious question around this particular matter, and let me start with you, Connie. Is this a racist debacle, or is it just a misunderstanding?
Well, this is just a massive series of misunderstandings, and eventually the problem with this is that we had our member, Mrs. Elana Barkhuizen, be the victim in the situation. So there was indeed a grave injustice done at large school Schweizer-Reneke, but this was due to Ms. Barkhuizen when the MEC Selula Hari stood on a stage and suspended an employee who does not actually work for him. No processes were followed, no labour laws were adhered to, and that's why we're going to court. Firstly, to get this unlawful suspension immediately set aside, and then to restore Mrs. Barkhuizen's dignity. She wasn't even the teacher whose class this was, she simply took the photo. We have no idea why she's being sanctioned, and we have no idea why she's being called a racist. If you take into account this is one photo of 4 or 5 taken on that day to assure parents that their children are happy at school, and this one photo which allegedly shows racial segregation was distributed widely, with the other 4 or 5 photos that show the children playing on the mat together, singing together, doing math together, using scissors together. Those weren't spread, and those immediately destroy the narrative that this was a racial segregation. And we don't believe this was a racial segregation at all. In fact, this was a teacher doing everything in her power to make new grade R children whose first day of school this is feel welcome, feel included, and make sure that they partake in class and reach their maximum potential.
Vukulu? Misunderstanding or racist incident?
It's very unfortunate, Sakina. First of all, when I actually looked at the picture itself, to me it served as a reminder that there's an existing continuum of apartheid in South Africa today, because no matter what amount of logic you're going to give, especially what this gentleman is saying here, that there was a misunderstanding, because they only wanted the students to feel comfortable based on the language oneself speak. But it's unfortunate that this matter is an apartheid replica, because apartheid believed that we're different and therefore we can't go to the same schools, we can't sit on the same chairs, and therefore we can also not live in the same areas. Is this not a similar logic that was given by the apartheid government? You give sophisticated logic to justify a wrong. And the stance taken by this movement is absolutely wrong. Let me tell you why. They say the teacher was suspended. This is a national question. It is raising national instability and a discourse. When you are suspended, you're only stopped for a period of time pending investigation. Is the teacher not implicated? Whether or not it was a class, she was implicated. It is believed that she took a picture. And like she is saying, like they are saying, even she also said the same thing, that it was not a matter of segregation, but they were misunderstood. But I see another complex to this matter. First of all, I believe that the picture also serves as a structural manifestation of racism, because racism is not prejudice, but racism is an interlocking sovereignty that reinforces structural and systematic oppression. And what I have seen right there only serves, amongst many others, as an espouse of what black people today are subjected to. We are still subjected to neo-colonial enslavement, to media misrepresentation, and also to the continuum of apartheid, as you can see present in that.
Let's try to get into some of the merits of this case. Now, Connie, you say that this was not Ms. Barkhuizen's class, and that has been established since. But what reasons was she given for her suspension?
That's the problem. She was given no reason. So I'd first like to just respond and say that there is a massive difference between admitting that we're different, which South Africans every day experience, that we've got different cultures, we've got different languages. It's this diversity, in fact, that makes us strong. Admitting a difference is not nearly the same as implementing apartheid, as your studio guest would imply. Mrs. Barkhuizen was given no reasons for suspension. She was told via a phone call that she's suspended just before the MEC announced this on a stage. So we're of the opinion that this was just a massive miscarriage of justice. There's one single photo that seems to prove this narrative, that we still got a segregation in this classroom, but then on the same day, literally 2 hours later, we've got 4 or 5 photos that show that this is not at all the case, that this is a class of children who are being taught by a teacher, and that when they're sitting together on the mat singing, when they're doing different exercises, there is no indication of any racial segregation. So before we jump on this, as political parties jumped opportunistically, immediately denounced racism that does not exist in this case, let's first take a step back as South Africans and just find the facts, and that's what we're asking here. Regarding suspension as a sanction, suspension is a very, very serious sanction for misconduct under Article 17 and 18 of the Education Act. This is meant for when a teacher has sex with one of his students, stabbings or serious assault, or steals from the school, then you're suspended pending an investigation. This suspension was also announced as a sanction, with MEC Sello Lahari announcing that the teacher's racism is clear-cut. He's only considering whether to suspend the principal as well. So this was clearly meant to denigrate her and to somehow punish her. That's why we're going to court, firstly, to say that we need to restore this teacher's dignity. She's a good teacher. Her only worry is about the children in her class, and she wants to make sure that they reach their maximum potential. We have so few good teachers left in this country. We need to keep the good ones so that we get our children to achieve their maximum potential. If we're going to offer one good teacher for a populist racist stunt by political parties and by the MEC, then we as South Africans and we as Solidarity are not doing our job.
So you say the teacher says she was not given any reason for her suspension. So where then does this narrative arise about her being suspended for taking and circulating this picture on a social media group?
This basically happened. So this is a school governing body appointed teacher. That means she works for the school. She does not work for the Department of Education. But then we had the Department of Education of the MEC, MEC Sello Lahari, stand on a stage in Large School Schweizer-Reneke and suspend Mrs. Barkhuizen. This is the absurdity of the situation.
Yes, but what I'm trying to get at,
Connie, an employee who does not work for him.
But we'll get into that in a second. But when you say she was given absolutely no reason for her suspension, is that entirely true? I mean, can someone say to you, you are suspended for no reason whatsoever?
No, that's why we're going to court. You need to inform somebody why they're suspended. You need to at least give them a written notice or anything like that. None of that happened here. No processes were followed. It's not that improper processes were followed, no processes. So we're going to court urgently to declare the suspension unlawful, and as a first step. After this, however, there are several political parties and political figures who will need to account, who have used their power to trample on a poor teacher's rights, a teacher who just wants to teach children. That's the only thing that she wants to do. And in South Africa, we found that accountability is one of the scarcest commodities. But we're going to hold several people to account. Firstly, it's going to be lifting the suspension, and then we're looking at a defamation case against the MEC himself. And after that, we've approached the Human Rights Commission to say that you need to investigate the rights of the school children who were denied education by protesters who stormed the school, climbed the palisades, and then disrupted classes. You need to look at the rights of this teacher whose freedom to movement was impaired when the MEC basically pointed her name out in front of a crowd of protesters who had threatened violence just before that and who had endangered her safety. And then we've written to the DA with regards to the youth leader who spread this photo identifying minors on social media without their parents' consent, and saying, but we need to be better. As South Africans, we cannot jump on each single instance that we think is racism, especially because of our past. We need to be much more careful regarding this, because if we make everything racism, then the real cases of racism are going to be the ones that are going to just disappear between all the noise.
Very interesting points that I want to extrapolate further on, but Vukulu, your response?
My response to that is very unfortunate, and very painful. That for the fact that he can speak openly and justify this wrong shows that us as black people have proved accepting to present-day oppression, and we are complicit in our own demise. You can never reduce this matter as just an issue of misunderstanding and politician finding an opportunity. If you understand where we come from and the fact that there was no reparatory justice done to black people, now how are you going to justify the fact you're saying that this country is diverse and there's nothing wrong with acknowledging the diversity by now making them feel comfortable in the school? Isn't it apartheid extreme laws were about separating people because they are diverse? You're bringing about sophisticated logic and talking about the dignity of the teacher, which means to you this matter means nothing. The fact that it is causing national unrest and concern from black people who are still going under hat, because you need to understand that this country was founded on systems, and the law that you're talking about right now, it's extremely anti-black. That's why you're even saying that this is not even legally it's not legally right for them to suspend her without suspension, for which we believe you are the one who is being opportunistic right now, promoting the hierarchical racism on the pretext that black is wrong and white is right, because right now you're concerned about the dignity of the teacher. But I find your movement and so many white nationalist organizations very ignorant about the current reality that South Africans are going through right now. It's the same attitude we've received in 1990, 1994. White people can never accept guilt. Black people had to compromise and say, let's move on and have a rainbow nation. Right now, you're not acknowledging the fact that the picture is wrong. The image shows, even if you say in the next 2 hours they were put together, the children, if you see the arrangement of the tables, there were 4 black children there and maybe plus minus 8 to 10 white kids. There were the tables of those 4 children. Even if you were going to say that they were separated on the basis of them copying on the first day, why was that such kind of an arrangement? If they, out of their own will, said, okay, well, we will group ourselves right on the same table, it will be understandable, right? Your attitude and your movement is completely wrong. And you might win a legal case because the South African law is on the basis of the Roman and Dutch law, which are extremely anti-black. So I feel sorry for you and other white nationalists who find this matter as part of politicians taking advantage for populism or whatever reason you have coined.
Connie?
Statement.
Okay, yes, so I strongly suggest that Ms. Vukulu calms down a bit. We're not a white nationalist movement, and the process of following laws is not something that is inherently racist. We're a country with laws, and that's why the courts of law rule this. Your guest in studio has a lot of emotion, but he's very scarce on facts, and that is exactly the problem with this whole situation. We had every single person in this country suddenly know exactly what happened in the school without actually waiting for the facts to come out. We've spoken to the teachers, we've spoken to everyone, and we know exactly what happened, and that's why we're working with the Department of Education to get this investigation completed. If we're going to go off on tangents based on every single photo and just disregard all the facts, then as South Africans we're never going to find one another. Calling someone white nationalist does not actually make them a white nationalist, in spite of what Mr. Vukulu wants to achieve. Saying someone's racist does not actually make them racist unless you can prove it. We're in the business of waiting for the facts and waiting for evidence before we jump to conclusions. We'll leave that to Mr. Vukulu. For our process now, we're going to make sure that our client's name gets exonerated, that it gets restored. The dignity of this teacher was impaired. Saying the dignity of the children was impaired by a teacher who gave them special attention is a unique argument in terms of you've got a great art teacher who's bending over backwards to accommodate people who cannot actually understand it. These students show up to the school not being able to speak Afrikaans or English, and the teacher can unfortunately not speak Setswana. So when there's a massive language barrier like that between a teacher and students, you're going to have detrimental educational outcomes. This teacher on her own cost arranged translation services informally to be able to help these children, to be able to get them to partake in the class. She was extremely successful, both of these teachers, in managing this, as we can see from photos of the same day, 3 hours later, where these children are all playing together. So you went from children who do not understand one another to children who are actually playing and learning together 3 hours later. If that is what racism is, then I have no idea why that would be wrong. If we're using language barriers, if we're using breaking down language barriers and getting children to play together and to learn together with a good teacher who bent over backwards and basically did the MEC and the department's job of facilitating the language challenge that they're facing on grassroots level, then I have no idea why what she did was wrong. Why would accommodating and getting people to work together be something that is wrong inherently? The real culprit here is the MEC of Education and the Department of Education Northwest, who have not addressed this issue, where you've got children showing up to your school not capable of speaking the language that this school offers in, not Afrikaans or English. A teacher should not be organizing translation services. She should not be organizing these type of things. This is what government should be doing. If there's a massive need for schooling in grade R or grade 1 for Setswana, then government should be constructing schools and enabling classes for these children to be able to go to class in the language that they literally understand their teacher in. Because if you're not going to understand your teacher, then it's going to end badly.
Well, quite a bit said there on both sides, and so much that I wish we had the time to interrogate further, but we don't. Those were the views of Connie Mulder, head of Solidarity Research Institute, and Vukulu Sizwe Maphindani from the Black Centric Forum. He's the president of that organization. Solidarity, of course, have decided to fight the suspension of the Schweizer-Reneke Lower School teacher Elana Barkhuizen, and this one is still going to grow many more tentacles. Hopefully we'll get the MEC and his side of the story as well, Silulehare in the Northwest Province. But we have to leave it there for now. Let's take a break. On the other side of that, we'll have your news.